people don't understand how good TJ McConnell is, especially.
I don't understand how good TJ McConnell is, XJ. I don't get it. He's a 5'11" white guy. He's 3 inches taller than me. He's a 5'11" white guy who can't get the ball to the basket when he shoots threes. Like if me and him had a 3-point shooting contest, I would win. Right now.
Come on, dude. No way, dude. Chill.
Have you seen him shoot an open 3? He can't get it to the basket.
Dude, he shot 40% from 3 this year on like whatever minimal
he didn't
take.
Actually, like
my point is just like if he's just open and just shooting it, he's probably never gonna miss. That's my point. It's like
I probably wouldn't miss either, dude. Like
I'm sure you're a great shooter. I don't know that you'd beat TJ McConnell in a wide open shootout.
Just to be clear, I do not think I would beat TJ McConnell in a shootout. I'm not actually delusional. Just to be clear, I don't actually think that.
This is Hot Hand Theory. This is a podcast where we talk about the NBA and break things down from an analytical perspective. I'm your co-host, XJ. As always, he is my brilliant co-host, Geoff. Geoff, it is our first pod since the NBA playoffs started. It's pretty crazy to say. I wanted to start by just saying thank you so much to all the people who have reached out to each of us asking, when the next episode was and when we'd be back. We've just both been super busy all around, but it really means a lot that people enjoy our content and our perspective on the games, on the game. So, yeah, I really appreciate that. Anything you want to say now that we're back, Geoff?
I'm just proud of you for saying analytical. You did it. You put the pressure on yourself and you stepped up to the plate. You were the Donovan Mitchell of introductions.
I want the pressure. I prefer the Josh Hart, but whatever.
Yeah, that's a great someone who just lives for the pressure. Josh Hart just doesn't care. He just gets the NYK braided into his head and he steps up every single time he's asked to do it. So I'm proud of you. And I echo your thoughts, of course. I mean, I've gotten messages too. I've seen, people tagging us. I thought it was so cool that Jokic brought up clone theory. And like, there are multiple people whose first thought is like, oh my God, hot hand theory. You guys are making we just started this thing, 7 months ago. And it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool that we've had somewhat of an impact and hopefully we'll continue to have more of an impact. And you said it to me on the side. It's really cool that like, we're not just this thing that people are like, oh, we're just kind of begrudgingly support. Like people are actively supporting and enjoying our content. So we're going to keep doing our best to deserve that.
That means a ton to us. If you're new here or you're a returning listener, but you haven't subscribed, please take just 1 second to subscribe so you can be notified of, when we drop pods or new videos. We have a lot planned for the rest of the playoffs and for the off season, and next season is going to be even crazier, better than this one. So super excited about that, but let's dive into some Knicks. We obviously didn't really get to comment on the Knicks and Sixers series, on the pod at least. So, most of this episode is going to be previewing the Knicks and Pacers series, but maybe we can just start by just saying, what, if anything, did we learn from the Sixers matchup that might translate for the Knicks going throughout the rest of this playoff run for them? Anything in particular that comes to mind for you, Geoff, that we could kind of start with?
So I'm probably going to be, I don't want to say negative, but I think we're going to somewhat disagree with our takeaway from the series because I actually thought that some of the more promising efforts the Knicks gave came in their losses. I actually think their most promising effort was Game 6, which is good for Knicks fans. Like carry that into the next series. I thought they played a really good game. I thought they deserved to win that game, and it's ridiculous that they went from up 8 to tied with 30. I don't know why they do that. We're supposed to be a rational podcast, but that like just enough. Just win the game when you're up 8 with 2 minutes and 30 seconds left. You don't have to let them tie it and rely on Josh Hart hitting another open 3 to win a series. I mean, look, Josh Hart, we're going to talk about him a lot. So I do think as we recap the Sixers series, it doesn't matter how much of what he does is sustainable, at least in terms of analyzing the Sixers series in isolation. It doesn't matter how it projects forward. All that matters is that you could make the argument that aside from Jalen Brunson, he was the most impactful player in that series. The Sixers left him open, and he shot over 6 3-point attempts a game and shot 43% on those threes. So like, you can't ask anything more from him. You can't because he gives you the defense. He gives you the effort and energy. He gives you the rebounding. He led the series in offensive rebounds, tied with Mitchell Robinson, 22 offensive rebounds in the series, 6'4" wing. He plays over 45 minutes a game. Like, it's not fair to be like, spend all this time talking about, okay, here are the ways that Josh Hart's lack of shooting can hurt you. And then he plays a series like that and be like, yeah, but like, let's project forward. And like, can he do it again? No, like he deserves his roses. And frankly, someone like me who was skeptical that he would even be able to do that, even be able to see the positive end of variance like that. I don't want to say I deserve to be laughed at, but I do deserve to be like scrutinized because I was skeptical that he could even do that for one series. He did it. And that was a big part of the Knicks winning the series in 6 games. The only thing I will say is that I thought the Knicks were the way better team going into the series. I don't think it should have required 6 games to win the series. Embiid was a shell of himself. I know he put up he put up big numbers for the most part, but like, he couldn't move. He was attackable defensively because if the Knicks were able to get him in pick and roll and make him a part of the equation more often, that would have been a huge deal. But they weren't able to do that because every single time the guy Embiid was guarding tried to run up and set a screen for Jalen Brunson, all the Sixers did was have the guy who was guarding Josh Hart run up and take that defender, and then Joel Embiid just stayed where he was because they didn't care about Josh Hart. So yes, Josh Hart making the threes was a good thing, but I would still argue that the Knicks underperformed relative to their talent advantage, even in spite of Josh Hart playing so far above his head. So I think that Josh Hart individually deserves his kudos, but going forward, I do think that like that's as good as he's going to play, and it's still a flawed paradigm. It's still a flawed strategy, and the Knicks didn't really allow themselves any proof of concept of any other strategy. They basically were just like, we know that this is good enough to win. We're not interested in trying any other rotations, any other lineups, and I just think I'm going to keep saying it. I think that's kind of a ceiling suppressor.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with everything that you said. I don't know. We're both very much focused on process. We're very much focused on doing what we think is the best process in order to potentially win games, as opposed to just seeing the result of winning games, and then kind of retroactively suggesting that the process that led to that was appropriate. That being said, obviously Josh Hart made incredibly huge shots, and just speaking to Josh Hart specifically, like I don't believe that he, has some kind of magical power to, be better when it matters most or something like that. But I do think that it shows incredible resilience, and I do think he's a highly, highly, highly resilient person, even at the highest level of athletic competition. The fact that he was red hot at the beginning of the series, was able to knock down shots, then went 1 for 10 after that. He went 1 for 10 from 3. He had a stretch of games. I think it was the end of game 3 all the way through the beginning of game 6, where he was 1 for his last 10 from 3, still able to step up and hit huge 3-pointers at the end. That takes a lot, man. That takes a lot of resilience. You can't just lose confidence and say, damn, I had it, I don't have it. It's one thing to be front running when you're hitting shots. It's another thing to be a little behind the 8 ball, missing shots, and then still make big ones at the end. So nothing you can take away from Josh Hart. Josh Hart's an incredible player, and I love Josh Hart as a player. At the same time, I do think, did you want to comment on that? Because I saw you hop off of mute. I don't know if you want to.
I just wanted to say that I think that most people, when it comes to clutch, pretty much only use it as a source of confirmation bias for what they already think is true. So if they don't like a player, they highlight when things are going poorly for that player and be like, oh, he's not clutch. Or if they do like a player, they like all the people who are like, oh, Josh Hart's a playoff riser. He makes threes when they count, so it doesn't matter that he's not shooting them in the regular season. None of them will say anything about him going 5 for 21 against Miami and what that did to the team. Like he went 5 for 21 in an entire series against Miami, against an 8 seed. Like, yeah, this isn't like criticize Josh Hart. This is I just want to say that like Josh Hart's a really good player, but I'm only pushing back against the idea that he's this clutch player who will always make the threes when it counts. He's going to shoot how he's going to shoot how he's going to shoot. You know, like that's if he had, like, honestly, I said this to you on the side, if he had this ability to just shoot better when he's more focused, he should be criticized for that, because why is he not doing that all the time? Like, why does he think threes don't matter in the regular season? The regular season matters. Like, come on, guys.
Yeah, I think it's a little absurd to kind of suggest, and I'm not calling out anyone in particular, but if anyone's suggesting that someone has the capability to be better when things matter more, then they should just be better all the time. Like, I'm not sure, unless there's like some pool that you can pull from, but you can only use so much per season, and then you just choose to allocate it to the postseason as opposed to during the regular season. If that was the case, I would say anyway, that is a long way of saying I totally agree with you. I do think game 6 was their best game, in my opinion, both from an offensive and defensive standpoint. So that's really promising. They seem to kind of put things together. They fumbled the bag a little bit at the end, but I think that's okay. Moving forward, I think they'll be able to, they have stuff to build on, because not only were they getting their offensive rebounds, not only did they mitigate their turnover percentage, they also were able to score pretty efficiently overall, if you look at kind of like the overall effective field goal percentage for the game. And their defense was really good. Their defense has been, I won't say really good, it was solid, but their defense has been really sketchy like throughout the series. And I think it's largely a result of free throw rate. Like, it's largely the result of fouling. And we know that teams are going to foul Joel Embiid. That is something that's going to happen. Tyrese Maxey is going to draw his fair share of fouls as well. But the team that the Knicks are playing next, they don't draw fouls like that. They don't have guys who just go out there and foul hunt and seek fouls and draw fouls reliably. I mean, Siakam can get to the line a bit, but nothing compared to like the guys that we saw in the previous series. So it's an entirely different look. And I think if the Knicks play defense how they did the last 3 games of that series, sans the fouling, which I think they won't foul as much, they have a really good opportunity with Indiana in front of them. And so I think that's you want to jump on that? I
just want to ask you, do you, I know you don't really, not that you don't care, but you don't look at this stuff. Do you know what the series line is? Do you have any idea?
I literally don't. I'm assuming the Knicks are very, very, very big favorites.
It actually kind of blows me away. So for those who don't know, the Knicks opened the Sixers series as underdogs. They were betting underdogs to open the series, and then they were bet up. So they were small favorites when the line closed before game 1. The Knicks opened this series against Indiana. Obviously, the series hasn't started, but the opening line was the Knicks minus 230, the Pacers plus 190. So the betting odds right now are saying that the Knicks are over 2-1 favorites to win this series. And that has been bet up. So like, if you want to make the argument that, oh, they're just opening, like the books are just making this the opening line because there's New York bias, they're trying to capitalize on people who will bet the Knicks because the Knicks are the more popular team. That has not been the case, because the line has actually gone the other way. It's gone up, and the Knicks are now minus 245 and the Pacers are plus 200.
Whoa. So I don't know shit about gambling. I as you know, and I don't know if people in our audience know that, but so I just opened up an implied probability calculator. So you said minus 240 or minus 245. What'd you say?
Minus 245. So that's like 70%.
Like a 71% probability for the Knicks to win the series. That's a huge favorite for a second round series. Yeah. That's really interesting. I don't know that I had them that big a favorite. I think that, I can say up front, I do think the Knicks will win the series. I don't give them a 70% chance to win the series. And so let's dive into a little bit about the Pacers and like what might make this a challenging series for the Knicks to any extent. I mean, I think we definitely have to start with Tyrese Haliburton in general. So just, for the Pacers, Haliburton, despite his kind of downturn since his injury early in January, I think it was something around midseason. His downturn has been significant. Like, he was playing at an MVP level before the injury. He came back kind of early and was clearly worse. And his return also coincided with the Pascal Siakam trade, which, I've always thought was like not a good deal for Indiana in the macro, and was not kind of the ideal fit for Haliburton, although I did think that it could potentially give them a higher ceiling for this season. But I think that it's really interesting for Haliburton. He's going to really, despite the injury and everything that I mentioned, he seems to at least be healthy now. He's going to be able to manipulate pick and rolls all day. That's what he does. He's a master manipulator. Something that we'll see him do in 1-5 pick and rolls and pick and pops. It's really interesting. Like, he'll just drag if you're in a drop, he'll drag the drop defender far away to the middle of the court and open up the pop for the screener. And the Knicks historically have a ton of trouble defending this because A, their principles are to protect the paint first and above everything else. And then B, their fives have trouble getting out to the perimeter, including Isaiah Hartenstein, who we saw, kind of allowed Joel Embiid to have his way shooting from the perimeter. He could kind of get those threes whenever you wanted. So that's going to be tough to guard. And I think with Haliburton, not only does he do that so effectively, he, in my opinion, I'm curious what you think about this, Geoff. This is like my hypothesis, but I think one of the reasons that Haliburton gets so many assists is because his jump passing and his patience allow him to turn what would be hockey assists into regular assists. So he'll like throw these ridiculous skip passes that would normally be more like swings to guys who are open, but he'll just jump in the air and throw it directly to that guy. Or he'll jump in the air and he'll fake a pass to someone in the short roll or someone popping out for three, with his eye manipulation, and then hit a secondary threat like across the court, which tends to be the player that the person he passed it to might have passed it to if they had the ball. So his ability to kind of like skip over the line in terms of moving the ball to the open player is, I think, in large part why he gets so many assists, because in a lot of cases, those would be hockey assists for other players. So I just think, obviously, Haliburton is going to drive this offense. He's going to be the one who determines how good the Pacers are offensively against the Knicks. And he is who all the coverages are going to be having to be designed to stop. Obviously, Siakam's the secondary weapon, which, you can talk about that, because I know you felt like, Siakam added another look for them and another threat for them, as opposed to just like a Haliburton run, half court and transition offense. But I do think it all starts and ends with Haliburton. And if Haliburton doesn't have a good series, then the Knicks will win this series pretty easily.
You know who you kind of just described as a passer? LeBron James. Haliburton's, which is, like, LeBron is just casually like Tyrese Haliburton is a passer, like the guy with the most points in NBA history also can do that, and he can shoot 40% from three, and he can be one of the most impactful. It's actually crazy, like, how good. Like, every single time we talk about basketball, I'm like, dude, like, this is kind of like LeBron. Like, it's just like that sums him up. But I think the reason that type of passing is so valuable is because when you cut out the middleman, it does two things. One, it takes processing out of the middleman's hands. So, like, if you that person, if you force a skip pass, or excuse me, if you force the person, if you take away the skip pass and you force them to make the outlet to the outlet man, who then has to make a swing pass, if they don't process it quickly, the possession's dead. And then also you decrease team turnover percentage by removing the number of factors in the equation. If the pass goes directly to the person who's shooting, as opposed to it taking two passes to get to the person who's shooting, naturally turnover percentage is going to decrease. So it's just an incredibly valuable basketball play, which is why teams that have Tyrese Haliburton or LeBron James, their offenses are usually very successful and they don't turn the ball over a lot. I loved everything you said about Haliburton and the matchup problem he presents against the Knicks. I couldn't agree with you more, and I do agree that he's the head of the snake. The thing I'll say about Siakam that I think he brings is, as good as Haliburton is, I do think that when the Pacers are in the half court and when the defense is able to take away that first look, Haliburton, despite his very, very good mid-range numbers, still is not at a place where he wants to take those shots at a high volume. He's I mean, nobody's Jalen Brunson, but he's not close to Jalen Brunson. You give Jalen Brunson the ball and the offense stalls, he's going to create a high floor look. And there's a lot of value in that. I think the Haliburton versus Brunson discussion is so interesting because you have two, like if you just were to take a glance at their EPM, for example, they look exactly the same. Like they're both elite offensive options who are poor defensive players. And, you know, they both come out around fringe top 10 player in overall impact this season. But their offensive processes could not be more different. And to bring us back to Haliburton, I think that can hurt the team offense when it's not happening in the first half of the shot clock. And the reason that I think that Siakam is so valuable is I do think that he can create those sort of high floor looks that you need against playoff defenses. I don't have, you know, the numbers to back this up because I don't think that the sample sizes are big enough. But I do think that something that will bring value and will confer value in big moments for the Pacers is when it's close at the end of games or when, you know, the shot clock is running down and Siakam can get them, you know, a 40 to 45% mid-range look. I think that's better than Haliburton taking, you know, these off-balance fadeaway threes that he likes to take in these moments because you see it all the time. He loves snake dribbling out of open mid-range shots. He doesn't love getting to 15 feet and pulling up. And you made such an excellent point to me on the side, you know, a week or two ago. You were like, well, one of the reasons it's good that he doesn't take these is because he can get a better shot. But and I think that's true, especially over the totality of a regular season. But I do think that in the playoffs, when a defense, especially a defense that's coached like Tom Thibodeau and knows tendencies, and when they're really honed in on your tendencies, I don't think it's as easy to get a better look than an open 15-footer that you're walking into. And I think unless Haliburton really commits to taking these shots that he's frankly not want to take, I think that Siakam's going to be really valuable to the team's offense, at least to their offensive floor.
I think those are great points for sure, and kind of really speak to what Siakam brings that they didn't have previously. I totally agree with you. I think the only place where I disagree, and maybe we don't even disagree about this, I feel like if Siakam could add that without detracting from what the Pacers do best, he'd be the perfect player for them. But because he can kind of detract from what they already do best, which is, you know, pace and space, obviously with his relative lack of shooting, you know, just looking at it really quickly, he is 2 for his last 14 from 3. So I think if he was able to do that, what you said, like kind of be like, okay, unfortunately we got into this late clock situation. We don't like to be in this situation. We like to get shots up early and get those high value shots really quickly. We got in this situation. You know, Haliburton doesn't really want to fall back to a mid-range jumper. We can go to Siakam and he can get us a bucket and still keep our efficiency relatively high. That's super valuable, but I would love if he was able to just blend in up until that point. And I think he does to an extent. He's tried to, but I think he's just not that good a shooter. And it's just the reality. Like, you know, he ended the season at 34%. And that's 35th percentile in the NBA. It's not really going to cut it. Like his last several seasons, 34.4%, 32.4%, 34.4%, 29.7%. And he shot 36% when he was 25 years old in Toronto. If he was that level shooter, 36, 37%, that would be sufficient to me. He's not at that level. You might say, oh, those couple percentage points don't matter that much. It matters a lot in terms of the overall result and the way that teams are going to treat him, especially when you have a threat like Haliburton on the court. You have to pick your poison. You're not going to pick the Haliburton poison if you have the Siakam poison of 34%. Like, you're going to be fine with that. So I just feel like if he could do what he does without taking away from what the Pacers do best, the other part for me is I think that Haliburton, when running the show with pace and constant movement, is not only better, but it also Siakam. Okay, this is a small sample, so I'm not going to say that he's really been the force to change this. But before Siakam, their transition frequency was about 16.5%, and they scored 3.5 points per 100 possessions in transition. After the Siakam deal, they dropped to 15.2% transition frequency and 2.7 points per 100 possessions. Might not sound like a lot. That's a difference of 5 spots in frequency and 14 spots in efficiency. They dropped 14 spots in transition efficiency after acquiring Siakam. Again, could be Haliburton's injury issues, some other stuff going on. But I do want to say during that same time period, their half-court offensive efficiency didn't really change that much. They went from scoring 102 points, 106.2 points per 100 plays in the half court, which was second in the NBA, to scoring 104.3 points per 100 plays in half court, which was third in the NBA. So if it was because of Haliburton's injury or other factors, it didn't really affect them in the half court. It only affected them in transition. And so I think the reason it didn't affect them in the half court is a lot of what you stated. Siakam is able to kind of elevate their floor efficiency even when the shot clock runs down, but he has affected their overall efficiency. And I think that that's because of the other things that he does to kind of have less of a positive impact on their overall game. So that's my concern around Siakam. And I think, does that play into the Knicks' hands at all? I mean, with Tibbs wanting to keep Haliburton and folks out of the paint, you're not going to be able to really do that with, with Myles Turner, who had a really great shooting season, a very good shooting season, a great shooting season last year, and a really good shooting season in the playoffs so far. So you're not really able to kind of cheat off of Myles Turner to protect the paint, but you kind of can do it with Pascal Siakam in a weird way. So I'm not sure. What do you think about that?
Well, Siakam's going to be the guy they funnel the ball to. Like, that's Tibbs' number one, overall defensive strategy, is to find a shooting weakness and use that player, exploit that player to make sure that the other team doesn't get shots at the rim. So in a weird way, as much as we just talked about, how there are things that Siakam is doing to impact the ceiling of the Pacers offense, and I agree with all the points you made, he's kind of going to dictate the Pacers ceiling in this series, because if he gets some high variance 3-point luck, if he's able to exploit being, I'm not going to say ignored, but being cheated off of and create good offense, that's going to be really good for the Pacers. I also want to say, I was going to try to talk about it, and then you brought it up. What Myles Turner has done this season is ridiculous, and I didn't realize just how ridiculous it was. He was this season from 5 feet to the 3-point line, 132 for 244. He shot 54% on those shots, including, mind you, being 33 of 44 from 15 to 19 feet. He shot 75% from 15 to 19 feet.
That's absurd. That's silly.
Absolutely ridiculous. He'll never do that again, obviously. But even if he'll never shoot that good again, it does point to shooting improvement, where, like, I don't know about you. I mean, I think everyone is sort of warped by bias somewhat. When the Knicks used to play the Pacers, and, I don't mean used to like 5 years ago. I mean, like last year, a season before that. And the book was out on the Knicks, like the way to beat them was to have a stretch five. When Nikola Vucevic, he would burn them. All these stretch fives would come in, and they would get wide open threes whenever they wanted, because Tibbs, wants his center protecting the rim. When the Knicks would play the Pacers, the biased Knicks fan in me was always just like, dude, these Myles Turner shots aren't going in. Like, he always shot them so high, and I would just be like, yeah, dude, just let this guy shoot. Like, I just, as a fan, I just had no confidence that he was making these, and I was just like, yeah, I don't feel like he's going to burn the Knicks. I've watched enough Pacers this season and seen enough Myles Turner shots go in that I don't think that they need to be on their toes and make sure that when Myles Turner sets a screen and he pops, the guy above the break is ready to hedge, because he will make shots, open threes and open mid-range shots, if he is able to step into them, if Haliburton is stepping into them. He is not like when the Pacers were struggling last season and Myles Turner seemingly was in every trade report, there was a lot of talk that was like, yeah, who cares? It's Myles Turner. And I think you kind of have to tip your cap to him and say, like, he didn't let those trade reports get to him. He stayed loyal to Indiana. He kept working, and he's remained an impactful defender. He's a good rim protector. And now his shooting floor is as high as it's ever been, and he's accepted his role. He's not calling for post-ups. He has very much accepted being like, okay, I'm going to create positive gravity, and I'm going to shoot when I'm open, and I'm going to keep the ball moving. I could not be more impressed with the player that Myles Turner's become. And we've been talking about this on air. With what they have in Obi, and I'm sure Knicks fans will laugh at this. I'm sure some will roll their eyes at this. With what they have in Obi and what they have in Pascal Siakam, I sort of just think that the Pacers can just play all 96 big man minutes with those three guys, and they're set there. And I think that that's what they should do. I don't think like maybe Jalen Smith. Jalen Smith had a nice season, a really nice shooting season. Who knows how much of that is sustainable? If we see Isaiah Jackson minutes as Knicks fans, we should be thrilled, in my opinion. But if the Pacers are just sticking to those three big men, that's going to be a lot to handle because that's three guys who can hurt you in different ways offensively. One through lots of up-tempo, fast break style, Obi Toppin, quick processing. He can shoot, as we know. He's elite at finishing around the basket. He just had like one of the best finishing seasons in the entire league, which would probably shock some Knicks fans who don't remember him. Like, remember when Obi shot, what was the stat, XJ? He shot like 60% of his field goal attempts in his last season in New York were three-pointers. Does that sound right to you?
It's something like that. Yeah.
Something insane like that.
Yeah.
Like this past season. So this past season, he shot 75% at the rim. His field goal percentage at the rim was 75%. And he was shooting 5.7 attempts at the rim, which was in the 74th percentile. It was just he was amazing this season in the up-tempo offense. He's really good processor. Then you have Myles Turner, who's making everything like I just described. And you have Siakam, who I described earlier. Those three big men are enough. And yeah, I have a lot of respect for them. And I think the Knicks are going to have their handful. With that being said, I do think the Knicks should win this series. I don't know about you.
Yeah. So like I mentioned earlier, I do think the Knicks will win the series. So to the Myles Turner point, he's just gotten better every season at shooting. It's been kind of crazy. I mean, from the mid-range, he shot 51%, then 54%, now 55%. These are ridiculous numbers. These are all like elite mid-range shooting numbers, obviously not on elite volume, but when he's open and he takes it, he makes it essentially more than half the time, every time. And so I agree with you as far as the three bigs that they have and like the different looks that they give you. Jalen Smith thrown in there as well in terms of his ability to knock down shots. He's essentially had a very, very low volume Myles Turner season. What do you think about the viability or even the necessity of a guy like Precious Achiuwa on the Knicks end, given some of this? All right, so just for those listening, Geoff rolled his eyes at me, but I didn't roll
my eyes. I raised my eyebrow. I'm a little suspicious at where you're going with this, but I'm curious. I have an open mind, as I always do.
So here's where I'm going. Mitchell Robinson to me was one of the best players in the series against the Sixers for the Knicks. And I think a lot of people would be surprised to hear me say that. People were saying they should bench Mitch. And I thought that was strange. I thought Mitch was like in minute for minute could be their second best player in the series. He was able to guard Joel Embiid one-on-one. The Knicks brought a lot of help that didn't seem necessary. When he was guarding Embiid, he was able to strip him, push him off of his spot, make things really difficult for him. When Embiid would miss, he'd always get the rebound, so Embiid didn't get second opportunities, didn't foul him nearly as much as Isaiah Hartenstein, was able to contest, keep his hands out of the cookie jar. Like, he just played, it was a masterful performance on a minute-by-minute basis. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson didn't play a ton of minutes in the series. A minute-for-minute basis, I thought Robinson was excellent. In this series, there's no post threat like that. There's no guy they're going to throw it to and he's going to go to work. You just mentioned about how they don't do that with Myles Turner, and Turner has accepted that role. They're going to look to pick and pop more. They're going to look to space it out. They're going to look for Haliburton to be the one to get in the paint, for TJ McConnell to be the one to get into the paint and spray it out to shooters. That's what they're going to want to do. And they're going to do that and rinse and repeat and recycle and over and over and over again. And every time they come down the court within 5 to 6 to 7 seconds, they're going to be trying to get a shot at the rim or a spray out for three. And it's not going to be working through the post. I kind of feel like Precious Achiuwa is sort of built for that kind of series where it's like, we might need a guy who can switch. We might need a guy who, like, okay, Haliburton's getting off. Like, we need to stop letting him just walk and gallivant into the paint. Maybe Precious can switch onto him, and we'll see if Haliburton can beat him off the dribble. Maybe we need a guy who can deal with Myles Turner popping out to three and Myles Turner is he's pretty flexible. He's pretty good with his dribble, being able to kind of get to his spots from the mid range. You can't just have a big kind of lumbering guy. Not to say that Mitchell Robinson's a big lumbering guy, but you can't have a guy who doesn't have the ability to kind of stay with a more dexterous player like Myles Turner especially someone who's going to pop and have a lot of space. So you're going to be able to recover and also cover a lot of ground, getting out to shooters without just giving up a easy driving lane. And Precious Achiuwa just seems to fit the bill to me. So I can almost see a situation where Precious is more valuable for the Knicks in this series than Mitchell Robinson is. Is that crazy? It's fine if it's crazy. I'm curious what you think about it.
It's not crazy, but the thing is, and the reason I quote unquote rolled my eyes is because I know this head coach, and I don't think it would come down to Mitch or Precious. I think if you introduce the idea that like, oh, Precious could do some some good things, he would just start playing them together. And I think that's an untenable solution. Unless, I mean, do you disagree? Like, I don't think there's a world where I don't think there's a world where Tibbs identifies that Mitch could be a weakness and says, okay, this isn't the series for you. We're going to sit you and we're going to play Precious. I think that he would say, we still like Mitch's rim protection and offensive rebounding. We need it. Okay, but Precious's switchability is good too. So how can we make them work together? I think that that's how he would operate.
You're probably right, but it's just you raised your eyebrows and I've lowered my eyebrows because that makes me sad. Because I do think Precious next to OG could do a lot of really good things in this series, given that the Pacers want to be 5 out all the time. And that's a super switchable lineup, which works extremely well against the Pacers' weaknesses, which it may be, to some extent, Haliburton, his ability to get to the rim in a one-on-one situation against somebody who can move his feet.
What do you think of the idea, to go along with what you were saying? What if the Knicks just made sure that Mitch was only on the court when Siakam was?
Yeah, that would be really smart. That would be kind of similar to something that we've seen from the Nuggets series so far, where they have kind of Gobert out there being able to guard Aaron Gordon, knowing that he's not really going to kill you from three. So it allows Gobert to stay close to the rim. I would like that. Do I think they're going to do that? No, I don't think they're going to do that. I could see potentially an adjustment depending on if things aren't going well. Hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but for the Knicks. But yeah, I think that would be cool if they did that.
I guess we also have to ask the question, is there any chance at all, any chance to you, that the Knicks try a lineup without either Hartenstein or Mitch against, a Siakam Obi front court? Is that a possibility, or you just think, I mean, I know how valuable the offensive rebounds are, but there is some merit to Brunson, Deuce, DiVincenzo, Hart, OG Anunoby against a small Pacers team that doesn't have Myles Turner? Or do you just think?
I think there's a near 0% chance that we see that kind of lineup, unless. So you're saying if the Pacers go with Siakam at the 5, so it's like a OB Siakam 4-5 situation, would they run that out? So I know they won't if Myles Turner is on the court. Like I'm pretty positive about that.
Definitely wouldn't. I don't think they should either. I think Myles Turner is by far I just think he can hurt the Knicks on the offensive glass. And I guess Siakam can too. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's a perfect strategy.
It's an okay trade-off to me, though. Like I'm not really worried about Myles Turner and Siakam like destroying the Knicks on the offensive glass. And I think Precious and OG and Hart, the three of them being out there, potentially could deal with that. But you're saying no Precious. So you're saying OG and Hart as the 4-5. So I would say no. I don't think we'll see that lineup. I think there's a low chance that we do. It would be interesting to try it, but
yeah. So just to bring it back to your original point about Precious and Mitch, I think when Mitch is on the court with Siakam, it's fine. You just put Mitch on Siakam, and I think he'll remain dominant. I think he'll absolutely destroy the Pacers on the offensive glass. I think he'll take Siakam out of the half court. I don't think there's anything Siakam can do against Mitch. Joel Embiid, even though I did say that Embiid basically couldn't move, Embiid was 12 of 34 with Mitch as the closest defender.
That's crazy.
Mitch was dominant against Embiid. I think that Mitch
it matches my eye test, Geoff. I was using an eye test. I wasn't using a data focused argument. So this is great to know. My eyes work.
Yeah. It's also great to know, I sent you that thread I did for the Strickland, and that number was in there, and you're not reading my thread. So I'm a little heartbroken, a little devastated. No, I'm not. But yeah, so, I mean, I think he'd do similar things against Siakam, and I don't think he'd be as exposed on the perimeter unless Siakam started to get hot. And that's the point that you're making, is that, like, let's say Siakam is having a nice shooting series. Precious can do what Mitch can do in one-on-one against Siakam. Like, he's very switchable, except Precious would be more switchable against other perimeter players, and he'd be able to take away Siakam on the perimeter more easily because he's able to get out and recover better than Mitch is.
Can I clarify here? I don't think Mitchell Robinson is going to be on Pascal Siakam. Like, I think Mitchell Robinson is going to be on Myles Turner, or if there's another, unless you're saying the scenario, you're specifically talking about the OB Siakam scenario, right? At the 4-5.
Yeah, I think that's the lineup he'll face the most will be an OB Siakam front court.
Yeah, potentially. How many? Isaiah Jackson didn't really play very much in the series. I think he probably averaged like 6 minutes or something like that. And then Jalen Smith just got a bunch of DNPs, which is cool. I mean, I like Jalen Smith as a player. I think all three of Siakam, OB, and Turner are like substantively better players than him. So I think it was smart of Carlisle to go in that direction. I can imagine Jalen Smith getting minutes in this series, given his just like ridiculous shooting that we've seen from him all season. So, but you know, he had a very, very cold stretch before the season ended, and I think that might have influenced the direction that Carlisle went. So, yeah, if the primary bigs that we see are Siakam, Obi, Turner, probably Mitch will mostly see a 4-5 of Obi, Siakam, and will be on Siakam. So I think you're right. Everything you're saying, now that I've like kind of talked it out loud, I think that sounds right.
Yeah, I think it would be. You agree that with Obi and Siakam as the opposing bigs, it would be silly for the Knicks to put Mitch on anyone but Siakam.
Of course. Yeah. And I don't even know the reason why I was like thinking about like what other bigs would they have, because I feel like against Mitch, I don't know if that's even viable for the Sixers. I think that Mitch would get like every single offensive rebound that like, I don't even know if they could get away with that, because I think Mitch can do okay against Siakam, and Siakam has zero chance on the boards against Mitch. So I could imagine them not being okay with that, you know?
Yeah, but Turner can't play. Are you saying they're going to have to play Isaiah Jackson more?
Isaiah Jackson, yeah.
Oh,
he's a good defensive player. He's a really good defensive player. He's really good on the boards both ways. He's not bad. And you know, I watch a ton of Pacers basketball. Just to be full transparency with the audience, probably the team I've watched the second most this year is the Indiana Pacers. And Isaiah Jackson's not a scrub or anything like that. He's a really good defensive player.
Yeah, I don't think, Impact Data likes him a lot overall, or it has in the past. Like he's been one of those like per minute darlings or whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't have an issue with Isaiah Jackson in a vacuum. I do think that in a playoff series where you have a coach like Tom Thibodeau, who's very prepared and very interested in exploiting weaknesses on another team, a player like Isaiah Jackson could hurt you a little bit more. And I don't know. I also think that Brunson would just attack him relentlessly in the screen and roll. But maybe you think that's going to happen against anyone, and actually Isaiah Jackson has as good a chance as any Pacers big in defending that action. I don't know.
I do think so. Actually, I think that would be the most favorable for of the fives that they will run out there, besides Siakam, obviously. So between Turner and Jackson, I think Jackson would do better with Brunson pick and rolls. We'll see. That's just like my kind of instinct, just seeing him play and move his feet. It's just like, I do think we should probably, because we're so far into this episode, we haven't talked about Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson is the Knicks offense. Like, the Knicks have three primary ways to score. You can tell me if you think I'm missing one of them. Jalen Brunson pick and rolls, offensive rebounds, and opportunistic transition opportunities. I think those are the three ways.
Josh Hart pushing the pace off a rebound.
yeah. Those are the three ways that the Knicks score like reliably to any extent. So it's a given to me that the Knicks have to crush the Pacers on the offensive board to win the series. I do think that they will. The Pacers aren't a good defensive rebounding team, and the Knicks are the best at exploiting that. We just talked about this scenario where the Pacers are in this conundrum where they're like, do we play Isaiah Jackson or do we just get bodied on the boards by Mitchell Robinson? Like, that's a really tough dilemma, and I think the Pacers will face dilemmas like that. It may be a situation where both teams are kind of pushed to say, who's going to change their style, who's going to adjust to us. And I kind of lean on the side of where the Pacers will have to adjust a little bit more. The Knicks, again, they have three ways to score. Primarily, it's through Brunson initiating everything. He's running all pick and rolls. He's running all ISOs. He's driving every time he touches the ball. He's responsible for everything they do in the half court. Do you think we'll see some guys off the bench? Alec Burks being the one that comes to mind as a way to relieve Brunson to some extent. Maybe not through his creation, which notoriously we both have talked about how Alec Burks is not an on-ball creator, but just in order to relieve Brunson, to provide some space for other guys when they're on the court, maybe if the offense is being led by Deuce McBride or Dante DiVincenzo or OG Anunoby at points where he's shown that he has the ability to do that. Give them some more space, buy some time for Brunson. Do you think we'll see Alec Burks, and to what extent?
I do. I think they have to. I just don't think you can go into a series, and I know betting odds aren't everything, but they're 7-point favorites at home. They're 2-1 favorites to win the series. I don't think you can just panic mode play only 7 players from the start of that series, especially when the other team is notorious for playing at a high pace. I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think that you can win a championship that way. And anyone who's listening to this, who's like rolling their eyes and is like, well, Knicks can't win a championship. First of all, they can win a championship. We've been saying that all season. They absolutely can win a championship. And second of all, the Knicks themselves believe they can win a championship, which is the most important thing. They are very much right now playing to win a championship. They're not trying to just win this series. They're trying to win a championship. If your goal is to win a championship, they need to win 3 more series. That's what their main goal is. And to win 3 more series, they need the most from Jalen Brunson. They need the most from OG Anunoby. They need the most from Dante DiVincenzo, Josh Hart, Deuce McBride, Isaiah Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson. Those 7 guys are their most important players. And yes, it's cool that Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson can play 45, 48 minutes in games and be good. That is a cool thing. That is something that no player in like the history of the NBA, besides, of course, LeBron James, has ever been able to do. Like, it's just not a sustainable thing. It's just they're going to run out of energy if they're playing 48 minutes a night every single game. I don't care like what anyone says. Eventually, their body is just going to wear down. That's going to happen. They're big favorites in this series. Yes, I'm not saying like tank or be a worse version of yourselves. I'm saying slightly sacrifice the micro to increase your chances in the macro. And so I'm not asking Alec Burks to play 20 minutes a game. That would be crazy. I'm not even that high on Alec Burks. I'm just saying let the guys rest a little bit, no matter how the game's going. Let Alec Burks play a couple minutes in each half. And rotate, like actually rotate your rotation, like get you can have a rotation with Deuce and Burks off the bench where all 4 of, Brunson, DiVincenzo, Hart, and OG Anunoby get a little bit of rest. And I think you might be surprised at some things you take away from it. Like if you look at the lineup data and you look at the way certain lineups perform, the Knicks are kind of leaving something on the table by just assuming that certain players need to be on the court all the time, because there are lineups that we're just not seeing that are really, really good and really viable lineups, especially against a small team like Indiana. You have a lineup like Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, Dante DiVincenzo, OG Anunoby, and a center. That, I would argue, is maybe their best lineup right now, and we're just not seeing it. And I think things like that hurt the Knicks, not only because you're just killing Josh Hart. Like eventually Josh Hart's legs are going to fall off, but you're also not allowing the team to be the best version of itself for moments at a time. Again, I'm not saying Josh Hart shouldn't play. I'm just saying if you reduce his lineups or his minutes to 36, 38, 40 minutes a game, you might be surprised at what you could see and find out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we'll find something to disagree about here. It won't be this one. I agree with you. I think, and you touched on the pace that the Pacers play with, and I think that this is something I wanted to really drill down on as well. But I do think that the Pacers play at a pace such that there will be many more possessions in this game than they are just got used to from another slow team in the 76ers. And that is going to just not allow the Knicks to play these guys the same number of minutes that they've been playing. It's just not going to be able to happen.
Was it you or was it Schwinn who pointed out on the timeline that in the first round it was the Knicks who played at the fastest pace and the Pacers who played at the slowest pace?
So I'm not sure what Schwinn said. So what I said was that actually the Knicks had the best transition offense in the NBA during the playoffs, and the Pacers were very far down that list. And I think that's really what that's a big point for me. So I think this is a huge point. So contrary to popular opinion, the Pacers aren't elite in transition. The Pacers play at a high pace, but that doesn't mean that they're elite in transition. Those are two different things that are often correlated, but are not necessarily so. The Pacers are elite in the half court. And it's just a little bit, I think this is such an important point because I keep hearing people say, oh, like we'll see if they can score in the half court. Like they do. Oh, they do. They always do. And I think,
well, I'm sorry to interrupt. It's a Haliburton thing. It's a negative Haliburton bias because this goes back to last year with the Wally thing. Like, I mean, the truth of the matter is that we mostly are surrounded by Knicks fans. So like the opinions you're seeing about the Pacers, that is the ingrained bias. It's an anti-Haliburton, and by definition, pro-Brunson bias. Like this is something that they think Brunson can do that Haliburton can't. And that's like, and I brought it up earlier, and I don't think that personally, of course, I'm coincidentally biased, but I don't think I'm biased when I said what I said, that Brunson can create higher floor looks than Haliburton as an individual scorer. I think that's objectively true. I think due to his willingness to shoot high volume from the mid-range, that's just something he can do. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that Haliburton can run a playoff half-court offense. I think he is really good at that. When I was critiquing Haliburton in the half-court, I was specifically talking about end of shot clock or end of game situations and his willingness to shoot those types of shots. I think those types of shots increase in value because it's just harder to create the types of look that make the Pacers great in the half-court over the macro sample size, So like they're really good in the half court because of what they can do early in the shot clock, not because they're doing it in transition, but because Haliburton, as you alluded to so properly earlier in the pod, when Haliburton just puts your big in jail in the pick and roll, there's so many options at his disposal. He can find open 3-point shooters with 14 seconds left on the shot clock. They don't need to create the types of looks that the Knicks can. So it's two different things. But your point is well taken. They're a great half-court offense. It's just different than the way the Knicks can be a great half-court offense. Or excuse me, it's different than the way Jalen Brunson can be a great half-court offense player. Because to be frank, I don't believe that the Knicks are a great half-court offense. I think Jalen Brunson is a brilliant individual half-court offense player, but for different reasons, I don't think the Knicks are a very good half-court offense.
Yeah, no, that you articulated it so perfectly, and I agree with everything you said. And I'm glad you articulated it because I understood the nuance of what you were saying about like late shot clock situations and being able to generate offense in those circumstances versus the macro being able to operate a really efficient half-court offense across the 48 minutes of a basketball game. So those are two different things, and I thought you clearly kind of delineated them earlier, but here I think it's important to mention for the audience, like that is a big difference. And I do think it comes down to people kind of implying or trying to imply that Haliburton has a lesser ability to create offense in the half court when, again, like you mentioned, early in the shot clock or early in possessions, he's actually elite at it, and not necessarily even like early, but like not within the last 6 seconds of the clock. The Pacers were, I think this is going to be shocking to people. The Pacers were third in overall half-court efficiency in the regular season. Not only were they third to, I think, the Boston Celtics and the Oklahoma City Thunder, third to those elite half-court generating offense teams, they also played against a set defense 79% of the time, which is 7th in the league. And not only that, that's the highest percentage among any team in the top 13 in half-court offensive efficiency. So they were ridiculously efficient. And they also played against a set defense way more than every other team, or that is anywhere near as good as they are in the half court. You could argue that they are the best half court team in the entire NBA, which is completely different from what you would hear like in terms of overarching perspectives on the Pacers. Oh, you just got to keep them out of transition and they can't score. They actually don't get in transition as much as you think, and they score with the best of them. So yeah, to cut to the point, they destroy you in the half court. They space you out. They play more quickly in the half court, and they are extremely efficient. You have to stop them in the half court to win, to beat them in the long run.
I'd love for you to explain something, or at least explain your perspective of something to me. And this is where I'd love to have someone like, I don't know, like DJ from KFS on, because I know he's really good at film stuff. And he just has a really good overall feel for watching basketball games. When I watch Haliburton in the pick and roll, he creates attention in such a unique way. And it's almost like it reminds me of something that you say all the time when you're talking about, for example, doubling in the post, one pass away, and how teams artificially elevate impact by doing something suboptimal. I always feel that teams overreact to Haliburton's shooting ability and artificially elevate his offensive impact. And I'm curious why he's defended so much differently. Like, he's almost defended like Steph Curry in the way that, like, they're just like, okay, we're not letting you walk into a pull-up ever. Like, he gets more respect than Jalen Brunson does in the pick and roll. Like, sometimes Jalen Brunson will just walk into a three, but Haliburton, his teams have never-ending 4-on-3 advantages. And I'm just curious what your perspective is there, why he's so feared in such a unique way. Because, like, when I watch him, it's not that I don't think he's a good shooter. It's that I don't think he's such a special outlier level shooter relative to his peers that he should be guarded that much differently. And I feel like teams kind of hurt themselves when they're guarding him by giving his teams these advantageous situations, because they have a lot of good players on their team. You give guys like Nesmith, Myles Turner, Siakam, even Nembhard. Nembhard's a really high IQ player who can shoot, who's good from the good mid-range, good at finishing at the basket. And it's like, you are these guys. Haliburton, like Brunson, is really the only guy besides Siakam who can create offense for this team. And if you're giving these other guys who otherwise wouldn't be as impactful, you're giving them head starts and allowing them to be impactful in ways that I don't think they would be if you just played them straight up. Why don't teams just say to Haliburton, okay, dude, beat us, like, just score 40 points? Because, like, and maybe I sound like an amateur, or I sound biased, or I sound like a Haliburton hater. I'm not. I'm just curious what your perspective is and why you think he's guarded this way, because it's kind of jarring to me.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, so from my standpoint, so you said they play him like Steph Curry. I think the actual comp for me is they play him like Trae Young, which is, I think he is a better Trae Young is what it is. And he is just willing to take those threes. Like, he's going to do it. And so they feel like they need to bend to it. Just like Trae Young is going to take those threes, but is not as good a shooter as Tyrese Haliburton is. Haliburton, for the last 2 seasons before this one, shot 40% on pull-up threes. Early in this season, he was I don't remember what the specific data point was, but before he like went through an extreme cold stretch after the injury, he was probably shooting like 45% on pull-up three. Like, he was like God mode pull-up threes, like peak Steph Curry. That's how he was playing. And that's when he was an MVP level player. I don't think that that's truly who he is as a player, for sure. But at that point in the season, I think you had to play him that way. I don't think you could even get away with it. To me, you're bringing up a great point, which is, of late, he has not been anywhere near that. He's been actually like bad in terms of his pull-up shooting. And so I do think the key to the Knicks in terms of guarding him, which is, it's amazing that you said this because I'm thinking the same thing, is to let him kill you from the perimeter, to let him shoot you out, like, shoot me out of the game. Go ahead. Like, you have to, because you can't live with anything else he does. If you're overreacting to him and you're creating these 2-on-1s, he will pick you apart. It's just like Trae Young. And I remember against the Hawks and the Knicks Hawks series that, Atlanta famously won. Julius Randle struggled in that series. I was calling for the Knicks to go under screens against Trae Young. Like, stop overreacting to Trae Young's shot. He is not that good a shooter. You're just making him so much better than he actually is, kind of like how you said. And it just didn't make sense as a coverage. You were getting gashed everywhere else. You're giving up lobs. You're giving up wide open threes to, Bogdanovich. That's going to kill you. You're going to lose that game. You may not lose the game where you're letting Trae Young pull up when he's doing, pulling out these very, very, very long threes on very high up pick and rolls. I don't think you're going to lose on that. And for me, for this series, it's very similar with Haliburton. I'm not buying his shot right now. It's not going in with the regularity that it was earlier in the season. I don't know what the reason for that is. It's not going in with the regularity that it has across his career to this point. The guy has shot 40% every year of his career from three. The last 2 years, 40% on both pull up and catch and shoot threes. And this year is much different. And so you got to play him the way that he's playing of late, not the way that his reputation is. And so I do think that teams bend to how he kind of to his offensive threat, because I do think he is that good. I think he's like what Trae Young was supposed to be, but I don't think that he has been of late. And so I don't think you can play him the same way. So that's kind of where I land on that.
To close the loop on this series and to keep it on Haliburton, but frame it in more of a Knicks way, because I think we've talked a lot about the Pacers. And to anyone out there who, you're a Knicks fan and you're like, oh, we know what the Knicks are. And we're not going to tell you anything new about Dante DiVincenzo needs to make threes. So what we're trying to do is present this matchup to you and provide new information in a Knicks way, or in a pro Knicks way, and what they're going to be up against and how they might guard it. So with that in mind, do you think they're going to learn what they learned at the end of the Sixers series regarding how they guarded Maxey and carry it over to how they guard Haliburton? Do you think that they're going to use DiVincenzo as the guy, and then Deuce McBride when he's in the game, use them as the primary defenders on Haliburton and let OG Anunoby roam free? Do you think OG Anunoby is going to be on Siakam to start? If you put OG Anunoby on Siakam to start, that sort of accomplishes what the Timberwolves are doing with Gobert, because they're like we said earlier, they're not going to care about Siakam shooting threes. So you have OG guarding Siakam one-on-one, which lowers Siakam's floor as a one-on-one scorer. And then also, since they don't care about Siakam shooting threes, OG Anunoby is now your primary roamer for when other bad things happen. So you're kind of maximizing OG Anunoby's defensive impact both on and off the ball by taking away their number 2 option as good as possible and giving him maximum off-ball impact. I assume that's where they're going to go, but at the same time, we've been surprised before. Is there any chance to you that they say, Haliburton's the guy we want to take away, we're going to put OG Anunoby on Haliburton to start?
I think there's a greater than 50% chance that OG starts on Haliburton. And I 100% agree with you. I think the clear best decision is to have OG on Siakam and play it the same way that you said. OG can roam, and when Siakam has the ball, he's the guy that's going to be the one trying to isolate, especially in the post. Now you have your best defender on him. It's just so clearly the better decision to start a series for the Knicks, to me. So clear. Like I don't have any question about it. Now, if it start that way,
I'd like to say, Akshay, we had a conversation about this, about good coaching decisions versus bad coaching decisions. And I actually thought it was a really productive conversation that we had through text. And we did fall on opposite sides, at least in terms of what we thought was an okay decision and what was a bad decision with the 76ers series. We talked about starting with OG on Maxey and then adjusting for that. And if you don't mind me saying, or I hope you don't mind me saying, you said, I don't think Tibbs deserves credit for that, because I think it was an obvious decision to start with OG off the ball. I think that Maxey's a bad matchup for him, and we didn't need a couple of games to figure that out. He shouldn't have needed a couple of games to figure that out. My opinion was, I agree with you that it wasn't optimal, but I at least can understand why Tibbs thought that Maxey was by far, he's not going to put OG on Embiid to start a series. So if you're not going to put him on Embiid, I at least can wrap my head around why Tibbs started the series with, okay, let's put OG on Maxey because that's by far the number 1 creator. I don't think it's that for the Pacers. I think that the Pacers have 2 perimeter creators, or at least they like to start from the perimeter of the mid post, that OG Anunoby could start on. I don't think it's a reasonable decision to start with OG Anunoby on Tyrese Haliburton. I think it would be hugely detrimental to the team's overall team, their overall team defense. And I don't think that if the Knicks start the series with Anunoby on Haliburton and then Tibbs adjusts mid-series, that's where I would be like, okay, I don't think he would deserve like credit for adjusting off that. I think we have to start the series with OG Anunoby on Siakam, and I don't think it would be reasonable at all to start it any other way.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. And yeah, so we're on the same page with this one. With the OG on Maxi thing, I think it's just like, I think that we just, not we, because we definitely don't do this in general in the basketball community, but sometimes it's easy to forget that basketball is like a team sport. And you can't just put your best defender on the best player and just say like, they won't be able to score because I have my best defender on him. It's like there are things called screens and there are all kinds of things you can do to make it pretty difficult for your best defender to just like stay on that guy. I think if your best player, is somebody who's going to isolate, then that if Maxi was just going to kind of ISO and then, I still probably wouldn't put OG on him in that circumstance, but it makes more sense to me. Okay, put our best perimeter defender on their best perimeter player and let OG kind of work on him one-on-one, not create advantages by bringing doubles and bringing help, and then play it that way. That would make sense to me. But this is not happening. Nothing's happening in a vacuum. It's not one-on-one. It's a team sport. And especially with a guy like Tyrese Haliburton, people talk about, well, he can't do anything without a screen. It's like, well, luckily, they're not playing one-on-one at any point in time. so the fact to me is just that it just makes the most sense. Put Josh Hart on Tyrese Haliburton, let him fight over screens and deal with like 2-man games. Let OG Anunoby roam and help stunt and recover and help make things difficult for Haliburton to get paint entry. And then also deal with Siakam, who is the guy who actually wants to go a one-on-one in these scenarios. It just makes total sense to me. Yeah, go ahead.
We could talk about that for hours. Like, honestly, we should devote like a whole podcast to it or like a whole fucking series to it. Just basketball is not one-on-one anymore. It's not like people talked about the way people talked about DiVincenzo in round one with no acknowledgement of what he does for your team. Like the way he and OG Anunoby were guarded in the pretty much the whole series. And the way people were like, oh, well, they weren't making threes. Why weren't they making threes? Why weren't they able to get the types of threes that they were getting in the regular season? More attention was paid for them. Okay, that's the first domino. How does that affect overall team offense? What does that do for other players on the court? It's like, bring this to Haliburton versus Jalen Brunson. Okay, Jalen Brunson can do things one-on-one that Tyrese Haliburton can't. But if Tyrese Haliburton is always getting a screen and you always have to respect that screen and he's always getting double teamed and he's always getting blitzed because teams don't want Haliburton to get ahead of steam. They don't want him to. How does that affect team offense? Like, you have to account for these factors. It's like people want there to only be, it's like they want basketball to just be reduced to who would win a one-on-one pickup game in Rucker Park. And I don't understand that. I'll never understand why they want such a beautiful and nuanced game to be reduced to such a simple thing. And it's like, it's just so strange to me how obsessed people are with, oh my God, what's your bag? And what, and it's just, the game is so much deeper than that. And impact is so much deeper than that. It's not just who would win in a one-on-one competition. It's extremely frustrating. And I hope that one of the things we do here at Hot Hand Theory is dissuade people from thinking that way.
Yeah, I respect and appreciate your soapbox, and I totally am on the same page with you about it. I totally agree, and I think it's just important to consider those factors when doing some kind of analysis of a series or an individual game. So, the last thing I want to say before we kind of close out the pod is, just looping back to the Haliburton Brunson conversations that always happen, that are going to happen and are going to be dependent on what happens in the series. Both sides are going to say, see, I was right. See, my guy's better. My guy's better. Something I want to mention is just what's really interesting is how we talked about how different they are and their different approaches and their different styles to kind of bend defenses and cause their offenses to perform at the level that they do when they're on the court. I think it's really interesting to look at their pick and roll numbers. Brunson, in over 800 pick and roll possessions this year during the regular season, generated 1.05 points per possession, which is elite pick and roll operation. Haliburton, over 550 pick and roll possessions, generated 1.05 points per possession. Exactly the same production out of the pick and roll, despite the very, very, very different ways that they operate. These are two elite offensive point guards in the entire game of basketball. And I'm just really excited to see them kind of play and see their different styles kind of clash and, see what happens. I expect the Knicks to come out on top in, 6 or 7 games even, but I do think it's a really great matchup, and I respect both of these point guards very tremendously.
I'm so glad that was the conclusion you were drawing. I was like, oh my God, is Haliburton going to be like 1.2 and he's about to just torch Knicks fan? He's going to piss him off again. Like, okay. Yeah. I mean, of course.
Geoff, real quick. The thing I could have said is that if I wanted to do that, and I don't know how I flipped this, but I flipped this back. The thing I could have said, is that Brunson in 300 isolation possessions, who is the isolation god, is 0.88 points per possession, and Haliburton in 130 isolation possessions is 1.03 points per possession.
Yeah, I mean, I know that you're not actually like presenting that data as if it's. I have to imagine that data is skewed in some sort of. Or at least that's my intuition, but we can talk about that some other time.
Yeah, we can talk about it. I'm just saying, like, if I was going to try to piss off Knicks fans or something like that, like, obviously I'm not trying to do that. I'm a Knicks fan, and I hope that the Knicks win this series. But
I just want to add, I just want to cap off. I think they're going to win the series in 5 games. That's my prediction. I just think they're clearly the better team. And look, we can talk about I'm going to leave this kind of ominously. I think it'd be really bad if they lost the series, like really, really bad. And I think that this is the window. Like, people keep talking about like, oh, like they just need to get Randall back. These posts. No, they played the conference semifinals last season against an 8 seed that they were favorites versus and lost. Okay, there were injuries. That's fine. It was still a series they could have won. There were still moves within that series that could have raised their ceiling that they didn't make. They're over 2-1 favorites in this series. There can't be any like, well, it was a nice season. Like they get Julius Randle back. No, they have the personnel. They have the team to win this series, and there needs to be an expectation that they're going to win the series. I think they're going to.
Totally agree. On the same page. Definitely have the same expectation. I think it'll take them probably a game more than it sounds like you're thinking. But I do think that they should win the series. I think the better team. I don't feel like the betting odds are pretty extreme to me, but also I understand why they're going that way. I do think the Knicks should absolutely win this series, and if not, we have bigger conversations to have moving forward. So great conversation. Excited for the series. Hopefully we don't have as long of a hiatus before we come back and talk about it again. And unless you have anything else to say, Geoff, this has been Hot Hand Theory.